Hey, calm down. So just over a month ago, we're not doing that again. How dare you? Just over a month ago, my older two kids, I have four, the older two had some friends over to play, and they were over, we had a lot going on. You know, like they still had to do their chores because I'm a responsible dad. One of those chores was to put away their laundry. If you have 6 people in your family and you miss 1 day of laundry, you now have 6 days of laundry. It's just the way laundry math works when people are nodding their heads. You know what I'm talking about. So that day, even though friends were over, I just asked throughout the day that they would put their laundry away. And so at one point, Ruby, my oldest, with her friend Claire, both around, Claire's 9, Ruby's 10, they're hanging out in the kitchen, and I hand Ruby a pile of clothes. I said, hey, here's some clothes. There's going to be more coming out soon out of the dryer. And I started to explain to her what I wanted her to do next. And in the kitchen, I turned around like this, and I just started doing something, and I forgot what I was saying. And then I remembered what I was saying, and so I finished what I was saying, and I said, got it, Ruby? And I heard nothing, so I turned back around, and she was gone. But Claire was still standing there, and I knew why Ruby left. It wasn't because she's like, I don't care what Dad has to say. It's because I stopped talking, so she thought I was done. And so I look at Claire, and I was like, oh, man. So I just said, and I was totally joking. All I said was, nobody listens to me in this house. So then I walked back over to the laundry room, and I'm starting to put more clothes around, like getting a pile for Easton, a pile for Ruby, for my wife, for me, all that stuff. And Claire, I turn around, Claire's standing there, little 9-year-old Claire, and she looks at me and she says, do you want to know why nobody listens to you? So I'm looking at her, and I'm like, do I have... like one of those fears you have, like why do I have a bat in the cave? Like, do I got a booger going on? And it's just hanging there and nobody wants to, nobody's listening. You ever had that before where you're talking to somebody and it's right there? Or you feel like you have one, you're wondering if you should pick it. Anyway, so I'm wondering, is that what's going on? What is she going to say? And so I look at her and I'm like, why, Claire? 9-year-old Claire, big eyes, looks at me and she says, because they don't care what you have to say. I know. So then I looked at her, I did what any mature adult would do. I looked at her and I said, okay. And I called the cops on her and told her that she assaulted me. Claire went to jail. It was a sad story for her, really, but you shouldn't do that to somebody in their own house. No, I'm kidding. I didn't call the cops on her. That'd be weird. I didn't call the cops on her. Actually, me and Claire have a great relationship. When she's over, I'm over at their house. There's always like a back and forth. She's got a great sense of humor. She's very sarcastic. So her and I get along really, really well. But have you ever had somebody, maybe you haven't been assaulted by a 9-year-old girl in your own house, but maybe in your life, you've had somebody say something to you that made you angry. Maybe you've had somebody do something to you that made you angry, and you had every right, every reason to be angry. Like, it wasn't one of those, why are you it's so irrational that you're angry. No, you had every right to be angry. You ever had that before? Like, maybe when somebody makes a joke at your expense and they think it's funny, and it's just not funny, you don't find it funny, and you're still thinking about it days later, years later, because it hurt. Maybe for you, it was an argument you got into with your spouse, your friend, your whatever, and you were in the middle of the argument and they said something aggressive towards you, something that cut deep, and then you had every right to be angry. Maybe right now you have a grown child, like somebody they're turning into an adult, or they are an adult, and they're making decisions that you're like, it just makes you angry because you know it's going to lead to hurt and heartache, and they won't listen to you. And in that moment, you have every right to be angry. And in all those moments, when you have those, nobody would blame you for being angry. It makes total sense. If you've been there before, you're in good luck, because today we're talking about that. When people have every right to be angry. And over the past 5 weeks, we've discussed anger through this series called Angry Jesus. Because guess what? If you haven't been here, Jesus actually did get angry. And we've learned that anger in and of itself is not a sin. It's actually a sign to pay attention to. And today, we're going to look at a story. For this Palm Sunday weekend, we're going to look at a story where Jesus had every right to be angry when you read it, but he chose a different path. And we're going to look in Luke's account of the Gospels in Luke chapter 19. Here's what we're going to see. Jesus went on toward Jerusalem, walking ahead of his disciples. And as he came to the towns of Bethphage and Bethany on the Mount of Olives, he sent 2 disciples ahead of him. Go into that village over there, he told them. As you enter it, you'll see a young donkey tied there that no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks, why are you untying that colt? Just say, the Lord needs it. So they went and found the colt just as Jesus had said. And sure enough, as they were untying it, the owners asked them, why are you untying that colt? That's my property. What are you doing? And the disciples simply replied, the Lord needs it. Now, if you're like me, typically you would read right past this, but I had to stop and pause and be like, this is a fascinating circumstance. Because imagine In 2025, you're driving down the road and you're with your friends and you see this awesome car, a car that you like, a car that you want, a car that you think God wants you to have. And so you get out of the car and you get into their car because for some reason they left the keys right there. And you get into their car, you start it up and somebody runs like, "What are you doing?" It's like, "It's okay, it's fine, God needs it. It's good." What do you think would happen? Think they give it to you? No, what are they gonna do? They're gonna call the cops and you're gonna visit Claire in jail. That's what's gonna happen. No, it does happen. Like this person, whoever owned the colt, just gives his property, his or her property, up to the disciples. Why? We're going to find out. So the disciples brought the colt to Jesus, and then they threw their garments over it for him to ride on. There's a lot of attention in this text paid to this colt, this donkey. Why? Because 500 years earlier, in a book called Zechariah was a prophet. This prophet predicted or prophesied that the king of Israel, like the Messiah, the Savior who would save Israel and really the world, would ride in on his triumphal entry on you guessed it, a donkey. There's a lot of expectation surrounding Jesus. There's multiple stories throughout the gospel accounts of Jesus saying, "I'm the Messiah, I'm the one," especially as we get toward this Holy Week, this day, this Palm Sunday. Jesus had set some expectations and people were taking those expectations. And guess what? The people of Israel at this point had not had a king or a ruler of Israel for over 700 years. And so now all of a sudden Jesus comes onto the scene. They're living under Roman rule. They've lived under all kinds of different oppressive, tyrannical rules. And now they're under the Romans, one of the worst of the bunch. And Jesus is walking around. He's doing miracles. And he's saying, "I'm the king. I'm the true king." So there's all these expectations. So I'm sure, probably, at least this is what some scholars say, that the guy or the girl, whoever owned this donkey, this colt, this owner, probably had heard about Jesus, had heard that he was coming to Jerusalem, and heard all about all the things that he had done and was like, "Okay, okay, great, take the donkey." All these expectations surrounding Jesus. And then as he rode along, the crowd spread out their garments, not just like they put them on the ground. Why? They're welcoming Jesus into the city. In other gospel accounts, particularly Mark and Matthew, they say that they put branches on the ground. And then in John says they were actually palm branches, which is where we get the term Palm Sunday. Why were they using palm branches? Because for a first century Jewish man or woman, palm branches signifying peace and victory. They were welcoming this king into the city. They thought they had victory and peace. And we're going to see more of their expectations. Where'd they get them from? Well, when they reached the place where the road started down the Mount of Olives, heading down into Jerusalem, all of the followers, all the people there began to shout and sing as they walked along, praising God for all the wonderful miracles they had seen. In John's gospel, he says particularly the one that many people were very excited about was the fact that Jesus had raised a guy named Lazarus from the dead. So all these people are gathering. They're very expectant. They've heard that Jesus is kind of a big deal, potentially the king of Israel, potentially the one who's going to save them from all these things. They have these huge expectations. And they're like, wow, he raised a guy from the dead. He healed blind people. He helped people that had never walked start to walk. Maybe he's got something for me. Maybe he can heal me if I need something healed. Or maybe he can heal my friend or my family. They have all these expectations, and not only for healings and miracles, but also the Jewish people believed that the Messiah, at least at this time, that the Messiah would come in and they would overthrow whatever ruling authority that was in their midst and establish God's kingdom on earth. And so if you put yourself in the position of a first century Jewish follower of Jesus or a person that was going to Jerusalem to see Jesus, they had expectations that he was going to overthrow Rome, that the revolt was going to happen. And then they start singing. They say blessings on the king who comes in the name of the Lord. Other gospel accounts say Hosanna, if you've heard that word before. And they say peace in heaven. They're seeking peace and glory in the highest heaven. Look what the king could do for us. And now if you put yourself in Jesus' shoes and you think through this potential, have you ever felt that way before? You ever felt that people wanted something, they loved you, or they want to be around you because of what you could do for them? You ever have that before? Has ever, that's made you angry? You ever felt angry because of that? Because you feel used? You feel like you're a means to an end rather than just a human being? Well, if you felt that before, I'm glad you're here, because I think Jesus potentially could have felt this as well. This potentially would have made him angry. But it's not just this crowd of people that has these expectations on Jesus. There's also another crowd of people, the religious leaders. They're called the Pharisees. Some of the Pharisees among the crowd said, "Teacher, Jesus, rebuke your followers. Tell them to stop saying things like that." Why would the religious leaders be concerned with the people welcoming the king? Because at this point, on Palm Sunday, which is what we call it now, they were actually celebrating a Jewish holiday called the, I'm drawing a blank now. Somebody help me out. I heard it. Passover, thank you. I don't know why I drew a blank. Just did. They're celebrating the Passover, which is a huge Jewish holiday, the biggest one. Tons of people would have traveled to Jerusalem to celebrate this holiday. In fact, many scholars would say that the city of Jerusalem, that population would swell 6 times this week. That's a lot of people. If you live in Oregon, which is a city population of 20,000 about, and the German-American Festival comes around once a year, and about 95% of you I know, because that's where I work, don't like it, not because you have a problem with the German-American Festival, just because of the headaches that it causes. The traffic, the noise, the litter, stuff like that. If you live in Oregon, 20,000 people, German-American Festival is a problem sometimes on the weekends, and that only gets to about 35,000. This would be like the German-American Festival times more than 3. Like if you lived in a city of 20,000 people, times that by 6. It's math, figure it out. It's a lot of people. It's tons of people. I'm not here for the math. It's tons of people. It would have caused a lot of pressure. And the Romans did not particularly like this because especially if they were expecting this Messiah-type figure, if they'd heard about Jesus, which they had, they might be saying, look at all of these Jewish men and women gathering in Jerusalem. What happens if they revolt? We can't have this happen. And so then you have these religious leaders that know that the Romans don't want this to happen, and they're thinking, we can't have that either. Yes, there were concerns about the theology of what Jesus was saying. Yes, the religious leaders were like, hey, you can't claim to be Messiah because you're not him. There could be a blasphemy charge there. But deep down for the religious leaders, as you read this, you see they were concerned that Rome would squash the Jewish people. Like if there was even rumblings about a revolution, Rome would come down hard on them. And the religious leaders did not want to lose what they had going. These men, instead of bringing God to the people, had made themselves into little gods. These men had tons of fame and power and notoriety and money, and they did not want this to go away. They did not want to upset the apple cart. They did not want to upset Rome. So they're telling him, hey, tell your followers to calm down. We don't need this to happen. These men, these Pharisees, these religious leaders were invited through the text of the Bible, like through the Old Testament, to be representatives of God to the people, to help people draw near to God, and now they're rejecting him. Again, if you're Jesus, this would give you every right to be angry. You'd have every reason to be angry. People seeing you as a means to an end. Other people are rejecting you totally outright. And how does Jesus respond to them? He says, if they kept quiet, the stones along the road would burst into cheers. Like you can't stop what's coming. That's what he's telling you. You can't stop what's coming. So as Jesus is riding into Jerusalem and he's hearing praise, but they don't fully understand why they're praising him. They want something out of him, seeing himself potentially as a means to an end. And now others who are denying him, telling him to shut those people up because we don't want to upset the status quo. He looks at the city. He looks at Jerusalem. And Jerusalem represented a lot. It was the capital of the Jewish nation. And Jerusalem was supposed to represent God's dwelling place, where the God of the universe, the all-good God of the universe dwelled. And instead of the religious leaders and the people drawing near to God, it was a place where people were rejected, were pushed from God. If you want to know more about that, you can go back to week 1 of our series, and we talked about that. This city and all of its intent and what it was supposed to be had fallen so far. Jesus would have every right to be angry. And yet, he wasn't. As he came closer to Jerusalem and saw the city ahead, he began to weep. He began to cry. He was sad, brokenhearted, filled with grief, probably disappointed, wishing things would have gone differently, wishing things were different. And I think we need to pause here and ask the question, why did Jesus not get angry immediately, but he got sad? I think when we ask that question, and then when we see the answer, it kind of reveals what God really cares about. Look at what he says next. Look what Jesus says. He says, how I wish today that you of all people would understand the way to, what's that word? peace. But now it is too late. And peace is hidden from your eyes. In Matthew, in his account of this, because we're in Luke's account, in Matthew's account, Jesus likens himself to a mother hen. Like he says, I wanted to protect you the way a mother hen would protect her chicks. I wanted to be there for you, and you would not let me. Like for some of the people that were praising Jesus, their way to peace was that this king, it was through violence. This king would overthrow Rome. So they thought, okay, peace is through Jesus overthrowing. This is going to be great. Violence is going to be the way we bring peace to the world. And then the religious leaders were thinking something totally different. They were thinking peace actually comes if we keep Rome happy. Let's keep things happy. Let's keep the status quo. Who cares if the people are suffering down here? I'm doing good. Let's keep the status quo. And Jesus could have been angry, but instead he says, I'm grieved. He weeps because the people and the religious leaders missed the whole point. And he tells them, because you missed the point, because you thought peace came through violence or not upsetting the apple cart, whatever it might be, some bad things are going to happen. Here's what he says next. He says, before long, your enemies will build ramparts against your walls and encircle you and enclose in on you from every side. They will crush you into the ground and your children with you. Your enemies will not leave a single stone in place because you did not recognize it when God visited you. The people thought the way to peace was through violence or through just being passive and saying, like, we're just going to keep Rome happy. And he says something interesting. You didn't recognize it when God visited you. Like the people are welcoming him into the city. They're welcoming the king into the city. But it's kind of like it's on their terms. Like they want Jesus to come, but he's going to heal. He's going to do what I want to do. He's going to overthrow Rome. This is on his terms. And you see throughout all the different accounts of what happened on Palm Sunday that peace seems to be the overwhelming theme. People wanted it, people craved it, they didn't have it, and Jesus says, I want to give you peace. And so for this Palm Sunday weekend, as we prepare, as we step into Holy Week, the preparation for Easter, if we're going to get peace, if we're going to prepare, then we got to deal with what we've been talking about for 5 weeks, our anger. We have to deal with our anger. Think about it. What makes you angry? What gives you righteous anger? And when you feel angry, let me give you a couple examples. If you've been through a divorce, as a child of divorce, I know that people get angry during that time because of all the craziness that happens. If you've been through that, you know you felt anger. And many times you would say, I have every right to be angry at them. Maybe through a breakup, maybe through an argument you had with somebody where they said something to you that cut deep. I have every right to be angry. Maybe a friend or somebody close to you betrayed you, lied to you. Think of an example where you've had every right to be angry. Why were you angry? Remember, anger's a sin, or anger's not a sin, it's a sign. Why were you angry? Because something was taken from you. What was taken from you? Deep down, something was taken from you. It was your peace. Like when you're angry righteously towards somebody, it's because your peace has been unsettled. Your peace has been fractured. And so, as you look at these people that are welcoming King Jesus and thinking about all the things he's going to do for them, and then you see the other people that are rejecting him completely, you got to think about, what about me? When I'm angry, like they wanted peace, they weren't getting it. When I'm angry, I have to recognize what's missing in my life. What's missing? We just said it, it's peace. But so many of us, Jesus followers, so many of us walk around holding grudges, pretending like everything's going to be okay, and that by holding a grudge, we're going to get ours and we're going to have peace and everything's going to work out fine. But how has it ever worked out? It will never work out. Holding grudges, being angry with somebody for a long time never actually does anything good for you or for your soul. It never has, it never will. You will never get peace that way. So something has to change. This half-hearted, paying lip service to the idea that Jesus is our king, but not really welcoming him in, has to end if we're going to experience peace. It's why, if I'm being completely honest, it's part of the reason why so many people who aren't a part of the church, not just Cedar Creek, but church in general, would call us hypocrites. Call us hypocrites. Because Jesus forgave, and yet we don't want to forgive. That's part of the reason. In fact, when you read some of the early Christian writings, like I was reading today, actually, from a guy named Clement, who basically said, let's unify around peace and reject those who would gather, or who would wish for peace but be hypocrites in the process. Like, if you're going to have Jesus as your king, Christians, Jesus followers, if he's the one that you say is my God, he's my king, then you can't just give certain areas of your life over to him. He can't just be king when you need him to be king. He can't just be God and Jesus, and it's so good when I need healing or when I need whatever. It's got to be every single area of your life, even and especially when you feel anger righteously. No, a king is in charge of your entire life. So we don't want to let anger control us. We don't want to be bitter. We want to be more like Jesus. And if that's the case, to have peace in your life, and this is your bottom line, you want to welcome the king in your heart. To have peace in your life, you want to welcome the king into your heart. Why into your heart? Because the heart really means everything, every area of your life. Think about when you first started dating someone, or if you've had that experience before. When you first start dating somebody, you think about them all the time. Like you basically revolve your entire life around this person. You go where they go, you talk to the people they talk to, you lose friends, you gain friends. Like everything is about this person. Why? Because you've given them your heart. And so if we're going to actually follow Jesus, if he's really going to be the king of our lives, we need to welcome him into our heart, not just into certain areas of our lives, not just into our Sunday routine or the group that we go to on Tuesday, but into every area of our lives. And as we do that, the promise is that we will then experience peace. We don't see Jesus as a guy who can just do good things for us, but who is actually good. And so we want to do life the way that he did life, especially when we feel every right to be angry. So instead of seeing people, Jesus had every right to be angry with the people and also with the religious leaders. Instead of seeing people as enemies or opposition, and instead of making war with those people, what are we going to do? If we're going to really welcome the king in our hearts and give over that anger and that bitterness to him, what are we going to do? We're going to see people as people. Some of you are like, did you come up with that on your own, Andy? It's a genius statement. I probably stole it from someone else. Either way, it's a simple statement, seems obvious, but it's actually quite profound. And I can say that because I did not come up with it on my own, so it doesn't sound prideful. This is actually a genius statement, to see people as people, and it's super, super complicated. Because think about it, the people that you're very, very angry with, especially for a long amount of time, you stop seeing them as a person who is created in the image of God and who matters deeply to them, and you start seeing them as an enemy, as a pawn, as a problem. When you see people as people, it becomes harder to hold things against them. It just does. When you see people as people, you see people the way that Jesus did. Think about why he got sad. Jesus got sad because he knew what was going to happen in the future and that something was going to suffer in the future. What was going to suffer? People. And he cared. The same people that would reject him would suffer, and he cared. The religious leaders and their city would suffer, and Jesus cared. Why? Because he saw people as people. And when you do that, you gain a bigger perspective on what's going on in your life. You experience a little bit of freedom. We see this even in the reason why Jesus went to Jerusalem in the first place. He didn't just happen there. It wasn't on accident. No, he intended to go to Jerusalem. Earlier in the gospel, according to Luke tells us that Jesus actually set his face toward Jerusalem. Like he was driven to go there. He needed to go there. And then in Matthew, we find out why. Why was he going to Jerusalem during this Holy Week, during Passover? From then on, Jesus began to tell his disciples why he was going to Jerusalem. It was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem that he would what? Suffer. Like that's why he was going. Many terrible things at the hands of the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of religious law. He would be killed, but on the third day, he would be raised from the dead. The path to peace in the kingdom of God is not through violence. The path to peace for these first century Jewish men and women was not through overthrowing Rome. Jesus showed them the path to peace. When you see people as people, not problems, not pawns, not enemies, not opposition, then you see that they matter to God, no matter what they've said. You see that they matter to God, no matter what they've done. And now I'm not, just so you hear, I'm not saying that if you're in an abusive relationship or like that, you should stay there because people matter to God. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you can be removed from that particular situation and still see that people matter to God. Everybody does. Every individual person was created in the image of God. Jesus knew this. He saw people as people, and because of that, he saw that they needed him. And so he intentionally, specifically, he set his face to go to Jerusalem to do what? To suffer. And we see this. As you read the Gospels, you see Jesus had a way out. He could have gotten out of this. He didn't have to do this. He even prays, if there's any other way, God, let me get out of this. But he continued. He did it. Why? Because he had a bigger perspective. He saw that when people matter, you can step out of each individual situation knowing that today is not your forever and today isn't the most important thing. When you know and you remember that people matter, and then you do what Jesus did on a regular basis, this is how you welcome the King into your heart and experience peace. You not just see people as people. When you see people as people, you also see the bigger picture. Like you see what's going on. The argument that you had right now that you're angry with and they said something to you that you don't want to give up, that argument's not going to matter in 10 years. Trust me, I know this, not just from my own experience, but also from being as a pastor for the past few years. We just had a conversation in my men's group a couple weeks ago where a dad got into a fight with his son years ago, and they still haven't talked. And here's the deal. The fight was about something stupid. He would tell you that, but they can't figure out how to reconnect, and it's breaking his heart. His peace was stolen from him. And there's anger, and they don't know how to deal with it. Is the argument, is the anger going to be important to you 10 years from now? If it isn't, you want to get rid of that, especially even if you have every right to be angry. When you hold on to that, you're never going to experience peace. No, the invitation is to actually give that to God. Why? Because to have peace in your life, you want to welcome the King into your heart, every area of your life, including in the areas in the relationships that are extremely difficult. Why? Because we want to see people as people that matter to God. And when we see people as people, we see the bigger picture, like that God is in control, that something bigger than us is happening, that God has placed us in a particular situation, perhaps, especially if you're a follower of Jesus, not to hold on to anger, but to be kind toward people. And we see this in the next part of the story. And so Jesus eventually goes into Jerusalem. You can read about it in Luke 19 and a couple of the other Gospels. And a bunch of things happen throughout this week. He teaches a lot. There's miracles. There's opposition between him and the Pharisees. They argue back and forth. And then all of a sudden, at the end of Holy Week, you know the end of the story. If you don't, here it is. Jesus is betrayed by one of his followers. He's arrested. All of his disciples, his followers, scatter. They abandon him. He's now alone. The good King of Israel is now alone. This Jesus who healed and was good and was kind is now abandoned and alone. And now they start mocking him, and he gets put on trial in the middle of the night. He's paraded in front of a crowd. There's this guy named Pontius Pilate. He's the governor of Rome at the time. His job, he's the governor of this Roman province at the time. Pontius Pilate's job is to keep things calm in this area. He did not want to revolt, because then his job would be on the line. His life would be on the line. So he has this Jesus figure come in, who he thought the Jews thought much of. The Jewish people at that time thought much of. He was the King of Israel. He just probably saw a week earlier, they were throwing palm branches on the ground, singing to him, saying, he's our king. And so he's got this guy that now he's been betrayed, and this guy's standing in front of him, and he's questioned him, and Pilate's like, I see no problem with this dude. When you read the accounts of Pilate questioning Jesus, you realize Pilate couldn't find any reason to be upset with Jesus or to think that he was guilty. And so Pilate's feeling a little guilt. You can read about that. And Pilate brings Jesus in front of a crowd of people. Now, we don't know that it's the same crowd that was a week earlier praising Jesus, but it had some of the same people in it, probably. There were lots of people there. So Jesus is then paraded. Innocent, good, kind Jesus is paraded in front of this crowd of people, which included the religious leaders, in front of this crowd of people. And Pilate knew there was like a tradition during the Passover that Pilate could free one of the Jewish prisoners to the people. And so he puts Jesus there, and he has this guy named Barabbas next to him. And Barabbas is a criminal. He's a thug. He actually was convicted of murder. Like, this dude was a bad dude. So you got that guy who would have every right to be punished. And then you got Jesus, who's kind and good and only ever did for others. And Pilate says, hey, who do you want to be freed? Pick one. Who's the most deserving of freedom? And what do the people say? Away with him, Jesus, they yelled. Away with him, crucify him. And Pilate's like, what? You crucify your king, the one that is the King of Israel, the one that I've heard fulfilled all these prophecies. You then gave him gifts. You're throwing palm branches, victory through peace. Like, you're going to crucify him? And in Matthew, you read that the religious leaders are the ones that are egging on the crowd, and the crowd's like, yeah, okay, that sounds good. Crucify him, kill him. And as you read between the lines, when you read all that happened in between Palm Sunday and Easter Sunday, or I guess Good Friday, when you read all that happened, Jesus upset a lot of people because he was telling them, hey, what you expected me to do, the path to peace that you thought that I was going to bring is not at all what I'm going to do. I'm not here to overthrow Rome. I'm not here to be your genie that if you just wish something, I'll give it to you. And so now people are angry. They're angry. And Pilate's trying everything he can to free this guy, free this innocent Jesus to the people. And they're saying, no, crucify him. And he says, he's your king. I've heard all the story. He's your king. And how do they respond? We have no king but Caesar. The leading priest shouted back. And then Pilate turned Jesus over to be crucified. This is interesting because in Roman times, the Caesar, at least at this time, Caesar would have had like godlike characteristics. Like they would have thought he was godlike in some nature, or at least he would have told people he was. And so you had these same religious leaders who earlier were saying, hey, Jesus, you can't say that you're the Messiah because that's like blasphemy. You're going to upset people. Now they're saying in front of everyone, Caesar's our king. Not God, Caesar's our king. Don't upset the status quo. Don't take our power. Don't take our notoriety. Don't change the parts of my life that I don't want to give up to you. I have a right to this part of my life. If Jesus is really your king, you do not have a right to any area of your life. Every area is open for him if he is really your king, even the areas where you feel angry and you don't want to let it go. Why? Because King Jesus saw people as people. He also, because he saw people as people, he saw the bigger picture. He saw that he was here for something way bigger than holding grudges and making people pay. And so what we learn as we look at the story of Jesus, specifically from Palm Sunday up into Good Friday, we see people are people, and there's a bigger picture. And as Jesus is being crucified, we see something even more profound. Jesus is betrayed, he's beaten, he's mocked. They put a crown of thorns on his head because he's the king, and they wanted to mock him. They spit on him. They're making fun of him, and they drive nails through his wrists and through his ankles on the cross, and he's dying a slow and agonizing death. If anybody in the history of the world did not deserve this, it was obviously Jesus. And yet he's up there on the cross doing it, and he chose this. So as everybody's doing this to him, you could tell, I could tell, as I'm reading this, like Jesus would have every right to be angry. Every right to be angry. I'm thinking through it. If I'm the one on the cross, if I'm that guy, then I would be like, and he doesn't do this. He doesn't say, hey, kill them, God. He doesn't say, smite them, destroy them, make them pay, take vengeance on them, stop them. They're evil, they're wicked. He doesn't show his anger. What does he say? He says, forgive them. Forgive them, for they don't even know what they're doing. This is what it looks like to see people as people. People are awkward and uncomfortable. They have weird motives, and they do things they don't want to do, and they say things to you they don't mean, and even when they do, they don't really know what they're doing. Jesus saw people as people. He saw the bigger picture, and because of those two things, he was able to do this. He was able to forgive them. This whole series, if you haven't watched the series, please go back and watch the last 4 weeks. We've looked at areas where Jesus was angry, and he had every right to be angry. But if there's one moment in Jesus' life where he had the most right to be angry, wouldn't it be right here and right now? Like whatever's happened to you, it pales in comparison, and I mean this with all due respect and empathy and love, to what Jesus experienced. And yet he didn't give in to his anger. Instead, he asked for God to forgive them. If we want peace in our life, we need to welcome the King in our heart. And if we're going to welcome the King in our heart, we need to see people as people. We need to see the bigger picture. And when we do that, we extend forgiveness, just like our King did. Not holding a grudge, not wishing that they would fail, not celebrating when they do fail. And here's the deal. I know this. I'm a human being. I get it. This is not easy. It is not easy to forgive somebody who you have a real right to be angry with. It's not easy. But we have a great example, great inspiration. Hebrews chapter 12, the author says we do this. We run the race that God set before us, especially when it's really hard, especially when it's difficult, by doing what? Keeping our eyes on Jesus, setting our face to Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith, meaning he's in cooperation with you as you try to forgive. Because of why? The joy awaiting him. He endured the cross, the difficulty, the most difficult thing he would do, and disregarded its shame because he saw the bigger picture. He saw what was happening next. And he did it because people matter to God. And here's the deal. I got to say this. Again, I may upset some of you, and that's okay. I'm willing to do that because I love you. You're not the hero in the story. Of course you felt anger, righteous anger for people hurting you, but you're not the hero in the story. It's easy to say, yeah, I'd be angry if I were in Jesus' shoes. I get it. I can empathize, but you're not the hero in the story. You're not. Look what Paul says in Romans chapter 5, for since our friendship with God was restored by the death of his son while we were still his, what's the word? Yeah, you don't really want to say that one out loud, right? That's difficult. While we were his what? Enemies. Like you weren't the hero. You weren't good enough for God's love and grace for you. You weren't good enough for Jesus to forgive you. No, we were his enemies. We were opposed to him. But even when we were opposed to him, even when we had done everything that would warrant God's anger toward us, We get his friendship because Jesus forgave us. And as this happens, we will certainly be saved, meaning that Jesus is going to continue, because he's alive through the life of his son, Jesus is going to continue to work with us. He's going to continue to make you more and more like him. So if you want to have peace in your life, welcome the King in your heart, which means every area of your life. You're going to see people as people. You're going to see the bigger picture, and you're going to forgive. So here's the hard part. Here's the really hard part this weekend. As I was talking, I know this because I've prepped through this message. I understand this because I'm a human. You were thinking about someone. I know this. People came into your mind, people that you're angry with, and you were making every excuse in the world to not extend forgiveness, to not see them as a person. And you're like, I see them. I know they're a human being, but they kind of suck. Like, you're thinking through all the reasons why you shouldn't have to do this hard work. And I get it, because they've probably done something that made you angry righteously and justifiably. But the invitation from your Heavenly Father today is to experience peace. And so who do you need to forgive? How can you experience peace and wholeness and freedom by extending forgiveness to someone today? The first step is to see them as a person that matters deeply to God, to see the bigger picture, that you were put here potentially to have that type of impact on their life by extending forgiveness. And so, God, today I pray that we would receive over and over again your forgiveness in our life, your grace in our life. Help us not to miss what lengths you were willing to go to forgive us, to be in relationship or friendship with us. God, help us from here on out to keep you and to make you our King. Not just in one area of our lives, God, but help be a part of every area of our lives. Rule and reign over our hearts. Help us to experience peace by seeing people as people, by seeing the bigger picture, and by extending forgiveness. We pray this in and because of your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.